Hello, fabulous friends. Today I want to talk a little bit about deck modification and how and why I decided to modify my tarot decks and, uh, and the reasons I came to that conclusion. So why would somebody want to modify a tarot deck? Well, there are a number of reasons. One is size and the ability to handle it. Some decks are larger or smaller than others, and some people have different size hands, and some decks, handle better than others. So I have, for an example, this is an RWS from the Universal Weight, and it's a pretty standard size tarot card. And from here, this is the Faces of Death Tarot, which is one of the ones I modified. And then here is another card from the Eros Garden of Love by Usi. So here's the standard RWS. And here is the Faces of Death. And as you can see, it's about the same height, but there's a bit of a width difference. The Faces of Death is wider. And then this is the Usi card. And as you can see, it is both wider and taller. So some people, may not like that. Some decks have large borders, like really excessive borders sometimes, and that drives a lot of people nuts. I know that for me, it drives me nuts with some decks, especially Los Scarabeo decks, and that is one that I'm going to be talking about. So some people will trim the borders off, and that just makes the deck, it makes the artwork stand out more, and it makes the deck more manageable. And another reason why people will modify their decks is to give it a more finished look. So, okay, I'll give you an example of a deck that has, a couple decks that have edging and gilding. So this is the Marigold Tarot, and as you can see, this has black edging. It also came gilded, a version of it came gilded with gold edging, and I chose the black edging just because it's $30 cheaper. But, the color palette is black and gold, so either one works perfectly for that. And this is the New Choice Tarot de Marseille, and it has the gold gilding, which is absolutely beautiful. And there are all kinds of gilding now. I mean, there's like holographic rainbow gilding and just all sorts of beautiful options. So yeah, and decks with gilding like that tend to be more expensive. But most tarot decks come with just white edging. I mean, they're cut from sheets of cardstock. So generally they look unfinished, and some people will edge the tarot deck with whatever color they like to give it a more finished look. So basically you're personalizing the deck to make it your own, and you're also making it so you can connect with it. I mean, you have to read with these decks, so you might as well make them readable to you. You have to relate to them on some level, and if you can't connect with your deck, then you're not going to get a good reading. I mean, it's just the way it is. So I'm going to show you some of my modifications. The very first tarot deck that I modified was the Faces of Death Tarot by Taroko Studio, and it came with the white edging. And the problem with that was that the whole deck, and I did a walkthrough of this. The whole deck. I mean, there are some colors, but in general, the deck is very dark. Most of the backgrounds are dark. The color palette is, well, that's pretty bright, but most of it is generally pretty dark. So to have this really, so yeah, there's no light colored cards, but generally it's pretty dark. So so to have the white unfinished edging just really didn't look right. It just looked incomplete. So I took a standard black Sharpie and I edged it, and that was the very first edging that I did. And, I was a little nervous because I had never done it before, but but it turned out pretty well. And one thing that that happened that can happen sometimes, especially with Sharpies and some other markers, or if you're not very careful with your edging, is that you can get some bleeding. And I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little bit of bleeding on the edge of that card. It shows up in some more than others, but I didn't mind it. I mean, it didn't interfere with the artwork. And this deck is very dark anyway, so a little bit of, extra black in the corner or along the edge is not going to hurt it. It's not interfering with the reading. It's not interfering with the artwork. It looks just fine. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to find a good example of some of the bleeding, and I'm not finding any. But let's see. I might have to go through this whole deck. So you can't really see it. Let's find a lighter color card. Can't really see on that one either. There's got to be one somewhere. But anyway, I mean, you can even see that the bleeding is not that bad. I mean, what little there was, it doesn't bother me. Here's an example. You can see that in the corners. See along there, a little bit along the top edge. Don't know if you can see that, if it shows up on camera at all, but it's very subtle, and it doesn't bother me. It doesn't interfere with anything. Here's one. That's a lighter color card. That also has the same thing. It's mostly on the corners and a little bit along the edge, but mostly in the corners. So it's not a big deal. So the bleeding on this, in this case, does not bother me whatsoever. But that was my first experience with edging. I was very happy with it. The deck feels more complete now. I haven't done a lot of reading with it, but I will be spending more time with it in the future. But now it just looks so much more complete now that I've done that. So the next deck that I edged is the RWS 2.0 from MakePlayingCards.com, and I got the custom box that goes with it, which was ridiculously expensive, but I like the design, and I like the octagram, the 8-pointed star, and I will probably talk about octagrams at some point just because it's a significant star symbol to me, and it means more to me than the pentagram. I know some people are gasping in blasphemy, but, all star symbols are legitimate, and for me, the 8-pointed star just has more meaning. But anyway, I digress. So the RWS 2.0. So, and also the star sign is on the back. So what I did with this deck was I edged it by color. I probably should have separated these two a little bit more. Let's see here. This can stand out more if I... There we go. Okay, let's do it that way. The pink and the purple were too close together, and they looked identical on the camera, so I just wanted to separate them. So before I did this video, I actually put the cards, separated them by suit, because that's the way I edged it. And so I wanted to show you what that looks like when they're all together like that. And what I did with this was, obviously I edged it by suit. So on RWS 2.0, it has these banners on the bottom of the majors and the court cards, not on the pips, but they're colored by suit. So wands are pink, which I guess represents fire, but a more softer color palette. And the RWS 2.0, oh, I'm getting into another suit now, is very much more vividly colored than some other RWS decks. It's clearer and brighter, which is why I like it. It's got some downsides too, but I still like it overall, and I do use it a lot. Okay, so the swords are this pale yellow. So yeah, and the cups are this sort of slate, grayish blue kind of color. And the pentacles are this pale green. And then the measures are this pale lilac purple. So I edged them based on suit, and it looks really great. Oops, I fucked that up. I put that on backwards. Sorry, let me fix that. Okay. It looks really great shuffled. Now let's see if I can shuffle on camera. This is going to be interesting, but we'll see what happens. I may not get a good shuffle of this, but I'll get at least a little bit of it so you can get an idea of what it looks like all shuffled up. But it has a really cool effect where the edging still shows through. Oh, well, yeah, you can see a little bit. I mean, it's not as... See, it's kind of mixed up. So, but yeah, and the more mixed up it is, the more, the cooler it looks. But yeah, so that is the RWS 2.0, and these are the markers that I use. This is these are Stabilo, which I think is how it's pronounced because it's a German company. And I saw a video of the factory where they make them or whatever, and it's pronounced Stabilo with like an SH kind of sound, which sounds kind of funny to me, but that's the way it's pronounced. So Stabilo. These are highlighters. They are pastel highlighters. I was looking specifically for pastel colors to match the banners, and they match pretty well. I mean, you know, it's not like an exact match in some cases. I think maybe the blue is a little bit too turquoise and less of that grayish color, but I mean, it's close enough. It doesn't bother me. It's pretty. It really makes the card stand out more, and it just looks cool. So the next deck that I modified is the Trip and Wait from tarotcollectibles.com. Oh yeah, there it is, tarotcollectibles.com. And it has a very bright, colorful, vivid, candy-colored, very psychedelic color palette. Just very, very bright colors, just lots of swirls and psychedelia, and it's just, you know, just very, very colorful and far out, and I love that. I love it. So the backs are this swirl color, but the main color is that pink, that magenta color. So I edged this in a pink highlighter. So these are Sharpie highlighters, and these are the thin ones. And when I edged this, these markers for some reason were like a huge pain in the ass. I wasn't getting a good color, so I actually had to go over several times, which took a long time before I got this. I don't know if it's just because it's the thin marker and it's kind of drier. I don't know if I got like the thicker, chunkier highlighter with a broader tip, if that would make a difference. It might. But I used both of these because I was hoping maybe I got a dud and maybe the other one would be better, but they were about the same. But I finished it. One of the problems, though, is that there was a lot of bleed on this. And part of it was my fault because, you know, by the by the third coat of coloring, I was just, you know, getting frustrated, and I'm like, you know, I just want this to be over with. But the bleeding does not interfere with the artwork. It stays within the borders, and if it really bothered me that much, I could trim the borders, and it would be fine. There is, I don't know if I can find an example, but there are maybe one or two cards where the bleed goes into the title a little bit. And it's probably just one card, and it's probably going to be the very last card I find. Oh, well, I mean, that's an example right there of, I don't know if you can see that, but it's not into the title, but it's just below it, but it's still within the border. But that's how bad some of the bleeding was. And part of it, too, was I probably handled the deck before it was dry, and that led to some of the bleeding, too, and that's okay. I'm not seeing where it bled onto any of the colors, or any of the titles, so maybe it didn't bleed onto the titles and it stayed within the borders, but that one card, it came pretty close. But anyway, it doesn't bother me that much. I'm sort of facing a conundrum now, because Tarot Collectibles re-released the trip and wait with a different cardstock. But the reason why they did that is because they released an expansion pack of some of the bonus cards that they had during the Indiegogo campaign, which of course I missed out on. I didn't discover this deck until well after that. And they had the deck available on the website, so I bought the original printing of the deck. So this new printing is a different cardstock. James from Tarot Collectibles told me that it's like 2 millimeters shorter, which I don't care. I mean, I don't care that it's smaller. But if I get the expansion pack, I want it to match my trip and wait. You know, I don't want them to be two different size cards and different cardstock. So I'm sort of in a conundrum if I want to buy a second copy of the trip and wait just to get the expansion pack, because that's a lot of money, and that's money that I could spend on another deck of theirs, you know. So do I want a duplicate of a deck I already have, or do I want to buy a different deck from their website? I don't know. But anyway, that's sort of my thought process right now. But anyway, that is the trip and wait. So the last deck that I have modified most recently is the Tarot of the Master. And this is a reproduction of the Giovanni Vecchetta deck from 1893. I don't know if you can read that. My camera's very blurry, and I keep trying to get a good picture on it, and I don't know. But anyway, Giovanni Vecchetta from 1893. And it's very interesting. It's pre-Rider-Waite-Smith. But it doesn't. It's a pip deck, but it doesn't resemble Marseille or any other pip decks out there. It really is its own entity. It reads completely different than any other tarot that I've seen, which is kind of cool. But the problem with this version of the deck, the Lo Scarabeo version, is Lo Scarabeo has these hideous borders, like hideous giant borders that were like the dark green color of the box. And it didn't match the color palette of the deck, which is sort of more pastel colored. And Lo Scarabeo markets their decks internationally, so they'll have multiple languages on their borders, which, you know, I get what they're doing, but I think it's hideous. I don't think it adds anything to the deck. I don't like keywords on my tarot decks. I like it open to my interpretation, which is really how the tarot should be. But anyway, the hideous borders bothered me. When I bought this deck, I never used it. It sat on a shelf for months. And I finally got the balls to get into trimming. I'm so worried about trimming because I was so worried that I was going to fuck up my deck, and you know, I almost bought a second copy of this just in case, but I didn't, and I'm kind of glad I didn't. My trim job turned out okay, and I will show you. Let me show you this real quick, and then I'll get back to the cards. So one thing I bought new scissors to trim with, and but I was so worried about not getting a straight line, not getting a clear cut. So I also got a guillotine, which you know, is a pretty standard guillotine. This is a smaller one, which is nice for working with cards because I'm not working with giant sheets of paper or anything like that. So it's nice, and it was my first time trimming, so I was nervous. So I got like title cards and stuff from this deck and from other ones, and I trimmed the borders off for practice because I wanted to practice on other cards before I got into trimming the actual deck, and it works. You know, I mean, let me show it this way because there's actual some little border there. So let me see if I can show you how this works. So pretty much you line it up with this metal strip over here as closely as you can, and there's also these lines for measuring, which, you know, are sometimes helpful and sometimes not. I found it better to eyeball it. I mean, that's just me, but I'm, you know, maybe I'm not as precise as other people, but anyway. So you line it up. I hold it because if you pull the guillotine down and you know, you don't hold it, the card will move. And if I've had it not secure, and then the card would, like, when you push it down, the card would come up, it would curl up, and it didn't interfere with my cut, but it could. So I learned very quickly that you have to hold the card down when you do this. So really, I mean, it's simple. And there you go. And of course it's not perfect. Many cards I went back and touched up with the guillotine and a little bit with scissors. I mean, but I didn't have much luck with the scissors, so I kind of abandoned that idea. The guillotine worked better for me. So that's what I used for trimming. And then I got a corner rounder. And this one has 3 sizes: small, medium, large. And I use the small because, well, I'll show it to you when I get to the deck, but the numbers and titles on the top of the deck are very close to the corner, so I was kind of worried about like trimming too much off, but it turned out fine. But I used the smallest setting, so basically do that. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see, but the corners are rounded. So it looks more like a mass market tarot deck. But yeah, so anyway, so that's what I used with this deck. I ventured into trimming. And it turned out pretty good. I really like this deck. I'm trying to read with it. It is a completely, I mean, it's similar, but it's a completely different system, at least in the minors, than anything else. So it reads a little differently. But yeah, I mean, see, I don't know if you can see that, but see how the numbers are very close to the edge. So I was worried about chopping them off. It didn't turn out too bad. You know, sometimes it came kind of close, but all in all, it turned out really well. And then it's not perfect by any means, but it's close enough where if you hold the deck, you really can't tell that much. I mean, it doesn't feel like, you know, there's cards jabbing out at me or anything. You know, it feels close to even. So, you know, that's not bad for my first time. So I'm pretty content with it. And the edging of this, as I said before, the Los Scarbeo borders on this were the hideous dark forest green, and it just didn't match. So I edged this in the green pastel, this one, from the Stabilo. And I did put it on pretty heavy, so it did kind of turn out a little bit darker, because I did go over it a few times, because I didn't feel that it was enough the first time, but it is a little bit darker than, say, this green along the edge. But I think it's fine. I mean, and if it really bothers me, I had an idea of maybe going over it with a yellow, because there are these sort of olive tones throughout. I don't know if you can see any of that at all, but actually you can see it on the back. So the back of this is the Magician, and his robes have this sort of greenish, but it has like yellow tints to it. So I mean, if that feels too green for me, I can go over it with a yellow marker. I don't think I'm going to, but you know, that is a way to improve upon the modification if that's what I feel I need. But the other thing about edging this too is that the problem with trimming this, I mean, the problem with trimming this was that the Los Scarbeo borders were uneven. So you know, you had the border around, and then on the left side was wider because it had the different languages going up the side. So when you trim it, the back is not perfect. So this side is a little bit wider than this side, so it's more trimmed on this side. I don't really care. I don't notice it that much. I did think at one time that I was going to reback this deck, which is something that another modification that people do is that they'll use contact paper or something, and you know, add a new back to the deck, which is kind of a cool idea. I was kind of reluctant to try it. I don't know if it would be successful, and plus it would make the deck thicker, I would imagine. And I think that this cardstock is fine. I mean, it's not, you know, spectacular cardstock, but it works well. It shuffles well, and so I'm happy with this deck mod. I think that it's fine. I really like it without the borders. The artwork pops, it just stands out so much more. The focus is on the art and not on the hideous green borders, and yet you get the edging in the green, so it's sort of reminiscent of the borders without the borders, and the color matches a little bit more. Actually, see how this color matches the turban of this king. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty close. And just like with the RWS 2.0, it's not like a perfect match, but it's close enough where I'm pretty content with it, and it's a huge improvement over what it was for sure. So so yeah, that's my experience with deck modification so far. I haven't had any other decks that I've wanted to trim. I'm not too fussy about borders as long as they're not huge and as long as they're not annoying and distracting. So most decks, like the RWS, for example, have these standard white borders, and they're fine. They're not bad. I mean, I don't really care. I don't notice them usually, so it's fine. So so yeah, so those are my experiences with deck modification so far. It's really a process of learning as I go, but it is fun. I enjoy it. I don't have the urge to go crazy and modify all my decks, and some people get the bug, and then they want to modify everything, and that's fine. I mean, it's your deck, and the whole point of it is to do what you want with it, make it useful for you, make it pretty for you, and that's fine. I don't frown upon anybody doing anything with their decks. It's theirs. But for me, I don't think it's necessary to modify everything. I just was happier with modifying these decks because I really think that they called for it. It's a case-by-case situation. So so yeah, so those are my modified decks. And I'm very pleased with them. So yeah, and they're all very different. They're all different sizes, but it's cool. So yeah, I hope this was informative. I hope you learned something from it. If you venture into the world of deck modification, have fun, take your time, especially with trimming decks. When I trimmed the Vegeta, I did it very carefully and very slowly, and of course it wasn't perfect, but since I took my time with it, I think it turned out better than if I had rushed it, which I never would have done because I was so afraid of fucking it up that I wanted to be very careful. So, but it is a learning experience, and especially with trimming decks too, is that the more you do it, the more confident you get with it. So when I first started the deck, I was very, very, very cautious, very reluctant to even cut it into it at all. But as I went along, it got easier. And the same thing goes with edging. At first, you're scared to put the marker to the side of the deck because you don't know exactly how it's going to react. Maybe you did some testing on some other cards and got an idea for it, but once it comes time to edge the actual deck, you never know what's going to happen. So no, it can be kind of scary. But I found, especially when I did this, first of all, I was, of course, a little bit nervous, but I thought it was a good deck to start with because it is mostly black, so the black on black is not going to upset me. But I found that as I went along, it got easier to do. It just got quicker, and the same is true with well, except for this one, which I had to do many coats, and this one I did a couple coats too. So, but for the most part, it goes very quickly, and I enjoy it. So yeah, there are tons of other deck mod videos out there. So these are my experiences, and go out there, watch more videos, and enjoy. Have fun, make the deck your own, have fun with it, make it pretty, and enjoy. So thank you for watching, and I just think they're so cool. I'm sorry, I'm sort of admiring my own work just because this is still such a new thing for me that I'm just so amazed that the difference that it made to do this, to change the decks this way. But yeah, so have fun with it. Take your time, learn as you go, and enjoy your tarot. So thank you again, and have a good day.